April that aren't too windy are few. The temperature is in the low 70s, and the wind is less than 10 miles an hour. This is my first time jumping this season. I was at the DZ a month earlier to pick up my rig after having my reserve chute repacked by a licensed rigger, which has to be done every 4 months. But that was March, and nobody was even thinking of going up. When I arrive at the drop zone, there is a refresher course being given to the beginners whose instruction was interrupted by winter. I take a seat in the back, always glad for the opportunity to listen to seasoned jumpers talk about the sport and share their experiences. When the class takes a break, I go up and say hello to the jump master who trained me. We talk about the weather and the new crop of students and the jumping we both managed to get in down south over the winter. It's after 10 o'clock before the plane is fueled and ready for the first run. It's a Cessna Caravan that holds more than a dozen jumpers per load. Manifest, the office where the plane loads are organized, hasn't put me on the first run. I watch as several skydiving virgins are briefed by their jump masters in preparation for tandem jumps. They receive training about how the process will work and what their role in it will be. In tandem jumps, 2 people use the same parachute. The back of the passenger's harness is attached securely to the front of the tandem master's harness. The chute for tandems is much larger than for singles, and has a drone chute to reduce free fall speed to what a single diver would experience, 120-some-odd miles an hour, rather than the wicked 200 that the combined weight of 2 bodies would achieve. People who visit for tandems tend to clog the works at the DZ, but the regular jumpers have to be grateful for the influx of cash they represent, because DZs are marginal businesses, and those who use them regularly want to see them survive. Many of the tandem jumpers come with friends and family, so the crowds can get heavy. Kids running around, lawn chairs, coolers, and video equipment everywhere. People standing with their necks craned back, one hand shielding their eyes, the other pointing skyward. It can be tricky packing a chute on the floor of a hangar when there are kids and dogs running around. Tandems are all scheduled for mornings, so by early to mid-afternoon, everything usually settles down and only the regulars and students remain. I watch as some tandem jumpers receive their instructions and get suited up. They wear jumpsuits, goggles, and sometimes altimeters, although the tandem master will keep track of their height and make sure that the main chute is deployed at the correct altitude. Manifest calls my name for the second run, and I start preparing a few minutes after the first load takes off. I want to be one of the first on the plane, so I can ride it to 14,000 feet or higher before hopping out. It won't be refueling between the first and second loads, so I need to be ready. It's a warm day, so I'm jumping in just shorts, a t-shirt, and strap-on sandals. I slip into my parachute, carefully connecting and adjusting the leg straps, which will support my weight, and the chest strap, which will keep me from spilling out the front. I strap my altimeter to the back of my left hand, drape my goggles around my neck, and approach another ready jumper so we can inspect each other's rigs. When the plane is back and the pilot has set the small portable stairway in place, I wait for a jump master to let me know when to get in. I'd like to be the first in and last out, but if there's an advanced freefall student on this run, then he and his 1 or 2 jump masters will be the last out. It turns out that there is an AFF student on this load, and he is only on his 2nd or 3rd level, so he will be diving with 2 JMs holding on to him all the way from his exit until the time when he deploys his chute at around 5,000 feet. I wait as the student and one of his JMs get in and make their way all the way forward so that they're sitting against the back of the pilot and co-pilot seats. I'm in next, and I position myself in the next most distant position from the door, which is between the student's legs, my back to him, his legs to either side of me, just as mine will be around someone else shortly. I take a moment to confirm that my altimeter is set to 0. Within 2 minutes, it's like a can of sardines in the plane, and we're rolling to one end of the runway in preparation for takeoff. Once we're at the downwind end of the runway and turned around, the pilot locks on the brakes and revs up the engine. The whole plane shudders with the power buildup. Finally, the pilot releases the brakes and we surge forward. After a few hundred feet, we're in the air and the airport is shrinking beneath us. Someone passes around a container of breath mints, and I take one and pass them along. Some of the divers are wearing full gear with jumpsuits and helmets with face masks and audible altimeters installed near the ear that will alert them when they have reached preset altitudes. There's a group of 4 or 5 near the door that will exit together with their videographer to perform a complex series of relative work formations. There's another videographer on board, who I guess is for the advanced freefall student behind me. The videographers wear special helmets with video cameras on the side and 35mm SLR cameras on the top that they control with a hand unit. They are very skilled skydivers. The student between whose legs I am nested is a big guy who is uncomfortable in these tight confines. He's very fidgety. One of the most important things you have to do when you're wearing a rig is guard your handles. Your cutaway handle, your hand-deployed pilot chute or ripcord, and your reserve chute handle. But there's more to be careful about than just the handles, as I'm soon to find out. The entire ride up is windy because this plane has had its side door removed for the day. Usually the door is left closed for a relatively calm ascent, but the door for this particular aircraft is not ideally suited to being opened and out of the way in flight, so it has been left on the ground near the fuel storage tanks. At around 9,500 feet, the relative workers and their video guy take their positions, some inside and some holding on to handles and standing on foot pegs outside the plane. On a 3 count, they're away, and the plane surges upward from the abrupt loss of more than half a ton of weight. The next to go is a skyboarder, who is having a tricky time negotiating his way around inside the smooth-floored, wind-filled plane with the snowboard-like ski strapped to his feet. He tumbles awkwardly out the door, and another jumper nearby sticks his head out to confirm that the skyboarder managed a safe exit. He gives a thumbs up, indicating to the rest of us that all is well. Behind me, I'm aware of the jump master and the student practicing hand signals and reciting dive flow one last time as the plane banks and heads for higher sky. Everything is going smoothly, and I'm just plain happy. Looking at the window, checking my altimeter, basking in the anticipation of falling through the sky 2.5 miles above the world. Then all hell breaks loose. At first I have no idea what's going on, except that I'm being assaulted from behind. It turns out that the student is actually on his first jump and has just erupted into a full-blown panic attack, flailing and scrabbling and releasing a shrill, keening sound that I associate with grieving Arab women. The JM who is sitting beside the student is acting to calm and restrain him, and I've been pushed forward and somewhat onto my side by all the activity. I'm aware of 5 or 6 jumpers watching the whole melee, including the student's second JM and his videographer, and I'm aware that time has slowed markedly so that a piece of cellophane swirling in the wind vortex inside the plane holds my attention for what seems like several minutes. Then things get really interesting. As I'm trying to get myself up into a sitting position on the smooth surface of the floor, I hear the JM behind me call out, "Open container!" The outer pack that's attached to the harness, and which contains the main and reserve parachutes, is called the container. The fact that one is open inside an airborne plane with an open door is a serious piece of news, and it takes me a moment to realize that it's my container he's talking about. That's as long as it takes for the second JM to come to the same realization. He was up on his knees in front of me, and now he scurries on hands and knees around me to get access to my back. I have no idea what the status of my parachute is, but I have certainly read enough incident reports to know what can happen if a rig opens inside an aircraft with an open door. My mind races through the scenarios I have read and allows me, in an instant, to envision the true potential of this situation. If the back of my rig comes open, then my tightly compressed, spring-loaded pilot chute will burst out of the container exactly as it was designed to do and bite into the wind, which is swirling chaotically through the fuselage. There will probably be a delay of about a second as the pilot chute burbles inside the plane before it finds its way out the open door. And that's when things really start to fly, literally beginning with me. As soon as the pilot chute goes out the door, my death will be certain, and the only question will be whether or not the other passengers and the plane itself make it back safely to Earth. With my pilot chute sucked out of the plane, my main chute will follow instantly behind it, which is exactly how it's supposed to work. Obviously, once my main chute opens and heads out the door, there will be no hope for me. I will be sucked violently out of the plane. Anyone between me and the door, when that happens, will go too, as will a section of the fuselage aft of the door that my body will go through rather than around. A big guy like me might take out a section of a plane's tail assembly as well. In short, grim. My mind courses through this entire scenario in about a millisecond, even as the second JM is still scrambling to get control of the back of my rig. I am back on my side now, completely passive, viewing events with detached equanimity. Joy surges through every fiber of my being. I am embarrassed to be this happy in these circumstances, but I can't help it. I am in the hands of fate, and half a second away from a truly spectacular death. I see the eyes of the other jumpers as they huddle away from the door and out of the path they know I might soon be taking. They watch us, and I see their perplexity as they see my elation. They probably think that I'm nuts. They may even believe that the whole incident is my fault. I don't care. I'm so alive with the thrill of the moment that I'm surprised that the onlookers don't all break into grins of their own just from their proximity to me. After a few moments, I hear the JMs talking. Mine is hugging me from behind, his arms around my chest, using his body to hold my container closed rather than trying to redo whatever has come undone. The other JM seems to have the student calmed down. I knew that if there had been a door on the plane, we would have simply closed it and made a hasty landing. But without a door, the situation is different. The primary jump master orders all jumpers to jump, including the student's videographer. The student, the two jump masters, the pilot, and myself will all land with the plane. The situation is explained to the pilot, and everyone who can jump waits for an adequate spot to deplane, and away they go, abandoning an imperiled aircraft for the safer ones on their backs. The pilot, knowing that there is an unsecured rig on board, begins a steep descent, not wanting to risk catastrophe any longer than necessary. I have never landed in a small aircraft before, and am enjoying the ride down with its steep descent and tight banking turns. Going up was never this much fun. At around 2,000 feet, a thought occurs to me, and I say to the JM hugging me from behind, What about the AADs?